Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. Again, in the description below and the link below, I'm going to have links for you to go to. Some of the companies that we use. We use GameStrat for our sideline replay system, so there'll be a link down there to check out GameStrat, and then I'll have a Twitter feed for JustPlay Sports Solution, which is a company that I use for some playbook software stuff. I'm still beginning to learn how to integrate all that, with myself and with my staff and with my players. So it's a great program to use for building game plans and playbooks and knowledge amongst your players and staff, and then GameStrat for our sideline replay stuff. So you can check out below in the descriptions below. You can check out GameStrat and JustPlay. All right. Hopefully you guys are just like us. You're in probably week 2, somewhere week 1, week 2 of your summer camp. Hopefully everything's going all right. You guys are probably somewhere getting ready to play games. We have a game next week, preseason game. So we've got 2 more practices this week, and then 3.5 or 4 practices next week to get ready to play a preseason jamboree. So we're excited about that. Today I thought I would do a video on some things that we've been working on. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about segments or segmented periods or specialized periods, and then integration into whole team settings. All right. If you hear some music in the background, that's my trainer in the weight room, getting after it in the weight room, throwing some weight around, and I love when he's in there lifting it, because he'll have 80s, 90s hard rock, heavy metal, and he listens to the same music I do. So if you hear that in the background, that's the trainer Steve getting after it in there, throwing some weight around. So what we're talking about is we're talking about in your practice plan, doing things in segments or situations, or teaching things in segments or situations, and then how to transfer that over into the integration of team settings. All right. So just going to look at a couple scenarios where you can, you break some things down into some teaching drills or situational type teaching within certain settings, and then for our kids, at least what I found in the past, what we need to do is how we need to integrate that into our team settings. All right. So if you look at first one, we'll talk about handling motions. All right. A lot of people will have formation recognition and motion adjustment or handling motion periods, where that's all they work on is how they're going to handle motion from different formations and how they're going to handle it in different coverages. Maybe they'll work on it in base, or maybe they're working on it in pressures. But the idea is they're working on 10 or 15-minute periods where you're breaking that down into formation rec and handling motions. And I think that's a good way to segment the importance of handling motions and getting your kids on defense to understand how you handle motions and how it might be different from coverage to coverage or from pressure to pressure. And I think it's good to go ahead and incorporate that into individual segments along with formation recognition, especially when you're getting ready to play new teams each week and you're working on game plans and how you're going to handle certain sets each week, or if they have a couple funky sets that you have to look at. It's always good to do formation rec and then some motion recognition or handling motion periods. All right. But then what you're going to have to do after that, all right, and what I found with our kids is we have to then take that setting and we have to mix it somewhere within the base plan. All right. Once we get back to a team setting, we've got to be able to throw 1 or 2 of those motions in the team setting so that the kids are now ready to handle it when it happens in the team environment. Because what will happen is the kids understand the drill, and then eventually they understand kind of how to play within the drill, if that makes sense. So when you're doing, formation rec and handling motions, a lot of times the kids get kind of ingrained into that, and they're focused on the motions and how they're going to handle them, and you're talking about the motions. The best way to then translate that or transfer that over to your practices is you have to throw some of those into your team settings, so that now your kids have to go from seeing formations, no motions, to all of a sudden emotion sprinkled in. So now they've got to think about everything at the same time and not just worry about handling the individual motions for 15 minutes at a time. Now, I think it is, obviously we do it, and I think it's a great idea to have periods built in where you're just handling motions, but then at some point you've got to throw those things into your team plans as well, so that your kids get used to handling those motions in the team setting when they're coming, once every 4 to 5 plays, and they're not coming 10 plays or 15 plays straight, and they know that they have to handle emotion. All right, so when they get in a game, you don't know when those things are going to occur, so you have to put that into a team setting so your kids can understand that they've got to be able to handle them when they occur and when they don't occur. Okay, all right. For us, when we're working on, early in the year, and then a lot of times throughout the season, when we're working on blitzes or pressures, there's a lot of times where I have blitz or pressure periods only. They may start, some people like to start them in maybe blitz circuits or blitz stations where you might have the back end working on certain components of a 3-under-3 or a 2-under-3 or a 4-under-2 coverage, while the front end or backers or people involved might be working on the different movement patterns. So you might have your ends working on, the difference between being outside as a jet player, maybe a one-gap, stab or a one-gap move inside to a long stick, two-gap move inside. All right, you may have your backers working to where they're working in different blitz patterns where they're working going, first into B gap, or maybe they're going second off the edge, or maybe you've got, some different patterns where it's the same blitz, but you change the pattern so that, the mic is B the first time, the Sam is C, and maybe the end is long stick, and then the next time you run the same blitz, but the end stays outside, and the mic goes first into B, and then the Sam comes under in the A. So you're working on, possibly the different tracks or the different movements of those blitzes, while the back end might be working on the coverage. So you're doing it almost in like a blitz circuit type of deal. All right. And then for us, what we like to do is we start off early with blitz periods only. All right, where we're in a 10-play period where everything is a pressure, and it's not the same pressure. We're working on maybe zeros. We're working on maybe zone pressures. We're working on maybe hot pressures. All right. We're working on maybe one free pressures. So it's not the same coverage behind it, but in that period we are solely focusing on the pressures that we are going to run, and it is on the practice plan, and it is scripted as a blitz period. All right. What we then have to do from there is we have to go back and incorporate some blitzes into a base team setting. All right, so that our kids can get used to understanding how to go from base settings and recognizing formations and motions, and then all of a sudden there's a pressure called, and now we have to have the mindset to be base to pressure, handling motions. How does it change when we're in base? How does it change when we're pressuring? And then up front, our guys have to learn D-line, how they're reacting in a base situation, and then when there's a movement, is it a one-gap or a two-gap movement, and where our eyes go, and what's the next read? So what we have to do is we have to take that segment where we work blitz periods, and we have to turn that where we also throw those into team settings later on. All right, so right now, early on, for us, a lot of times on defense, is our segments are broken up differently to where we have pressure segments only and base segments only. All right, as we evolve further throughout the year, we then have to have team settings to where we have pressures mixed in with base calls, because when you call a game in a situation that your kids are going to play in, all right, you can't get your kids used to playing 10 plays straight base, 10 plays straight pressure, because that's usually not how you call a game. You got to get them used to a base call with a pressure, maybe two pressures in a row, maybe three bases in a row. If you have any substitution packages, then you may have to get into, if you're working third down situations, all right? You may work third down situations for 10 or 15 minutes at a time, one day a week, and you may be working certain scenarios, certain situations in third down, all right? I think you then have to take those situations and somehow segment them into team settings so that a kid can understand that a third down setting can happen at any time, but third down settings or situations don't happen 15 plays in a row. All right, so it's good to teach the mindset of those settings, and if there are different sub-packages that you're using, I think it's good to do that, all right, in certain segments, but then I think it's also good to sprinkle those in throughout the course later on, maybe in a team setting, so that a kid knows that third down isn't going to be a third down 15 plays straight. So he's got to learn how to play a first down into a second down, or a first down into a third down, or a certain situation that is going to happen so fluidly on a football field. All right, they have to be able to make those adjustments as they go, so you need to incorporate those things. Once they're taught and learned in certain segments, you need to build them into, all right, or integrate them into team settings. All right, a lot of times for us in the read game on offense, there will be certain periods where I'm only working on read game, whether it be our inside zone or veer read things with our key screens, okay, whether it be our outside read game where we might be, running power read or some type of, front side jet action, where it may be, a bash play, or where it could be motion, it could be a back, it could be the quarterback shuffling on a power toss read, all right? But we are working on our read game only, and we have certain segments where for 10 or 15 minutes in a period, I've got all read plays scripted, so I can get our quarterbacks comfortable with the exchanges and who we're reading and where our eyes go, and if we're working on it with jet, then we got to use jet. If we're working on it with a tailback, if it's an inside mesh, if we've got the quarterback as the outside component and then we got the quarterback as the inside component. I like to do all those things a lot of times segmented first, all right, to where we are working on those things only, all right? But then eventually what I have to do is I have to integrate later on into team settings. I have to integrate the read plays in with everything else that we're running, so that our quarterback has to understand that not every play is a read play, and not every play in a game is going to be a read play, so we can't just focus on 10 to 15 minutes straight all the time of read plays when we're not going to call all read plays in a game. So I've got to take that quarterback and those backs and the people that are involved and get them in settings where we are getting a ton of reps in the read game, but at the same time I then have to go back in our team sessions and I have to throw some read plays mixed in with some non-read plays, some passing plays, and some other things so that the kids get a better feel of how the game might actually progress. Okay, but I always early on in practices in the first couple weeks and even sometimes on a Monday or a Tuesday, I always segment some of our read game stuff and keep it where they're in periods of read game only. All right, but later on I have to integrate that into a regular team setting. I can't keep a just read segment of practice and feel like, all right, I've already worked on those plays, so when I go to full team sessions or whatever it may be, I don't need to run those in my team session. A lot of times, as an offensive coach, when you're trying to get through a lot of different plays, you want to make sure that over the course of a certain, amount of days that you get everything in on your game plan that you're going to call, so you may have some different calls that you make in inside run and team or skeleton or however you break your practices up. But I think to have them in segments first, then you have to kind of bring them back into a team setting where you put them all together so the quarterback gets a better feel of what the game plan is. All right, so we will always break them down first individually, but then I have to run them later on. All right, we do the same thing with the screen game. A lot of times within your screen game, you're going to work the different components of the screen game. So you'll have the quarterbacks working on the mechanics of the screen, the footwork. Maybe there's, if you're looking off certain screens and then coming back and throwing screens, the quarterback's got to work on that. You may be working on, with just the receivers on air, the footwork of the screen plays. So that if it's a bubble screen or a now screen as opposed to a tunnel screen that's working its way inside, the footwork's going to be a little bit different, the timing's going to be a little bit different, the throws are going to be different. All right, so you're going to try and work those things individually. All right, if you're running slow screens with the tailback and you're going to work the timing of it first with the quarterback and his drops and what he's looking at, and then the tailback's timing and when the tailback gets out, and then the throw that the quarterback has to make, how that slow screen to the back is a little bit different than maybe that tunnel screen to the X outside. All right, so at first you're breaking the screen game up and you're making the different throws and the different footwork and understanding that the different screens are actually being thrown and they're going to hit in different locations, while the offensive line or the blocking component of the screen game, they may be doing segments where they're working on, all right, teaching their, the offensive lineman may be learning who is a sidewalk player, all right, who is an alley player, and who is a rat kill player, if that's how you do your screens. So you may be working a lineman on, hey, this is how when we get out, this first time you're going to get out, you're working the sidewalk, your second out, you're working the alley, all right, last out, you're working a rat kill, then maybe you change it up and you say, hey, there was some traffic in there, you got out first, so you're going sidewalk, you were supposed to be sidewalk, but you got out later, so you're going alley, last guy comes and he works the rat kill, okay? Maybe you have the perimeter blocked a little bit different to where the first guy out that's working the sidewalk has to make sure he's responsible for a corner or something out there that's unblocked, okay? Maybe you're throwing a screen to a single receiver and you don't have anybody to protect him, so you've got to get your tackle or guard or whoever it may be out there to make sure you kick out. All right, that sidewalk sideline player has to kick out that corner. But then maybe you throw a slow screen to a tailback and maybe your single receiver can crack the first thing in the box, and now that he cracks the first thing in the box, you still need somebody to go protect the tailback because there's nobody blocking the corner. Okay, if you threw the slow screen to the single side and the single blocked the corner, now your offensive linemen have to understand if the corner's blocked, that's going to change a little bit how we're blocking it, because the guy that's going to the sidewalk we've already got the corner block, so that becomes more of an alley, all right, than it does a sidewalk, so those things are going to change. If you throw it to a 2-receiver side and you have a slot receiver that can protect the X or Z that may be tunneling back inside, you've got to understand that now your linemen have to know, we've got the corner blocked. Now when we get out and up, we've got to understand where we're going. So you may segment that to where your O-line coach is working some of those scenarios in the screen game and he's working them separately. All right? Then we'll get together a lot of times and we'll throw screen periods as a full team where we'll work on nothing but screens. Okay? The big issue with this is the fact that once the defense or the scout kids understand it's a screen period, they stop rushing the passer. So you want to do these periods as an offense so your kids get multiple reps in the screen game, and it's important to have all the components working together. Once you've taught them and worked them separately, now you want all the components to come together in a screen game. So a lot of times you'll work screen periods to where you're calling all your screen plays so that your kids are getting used to running the screen plays. Problem with that is defense sometimes catches on, scout team All-Americans, you have guys that are heroes, and all of a sudden they stop rushing the passer. So what you need to do is you need to take that screen game and incorporate it and integrate it into your normal practice plan in your team periods. Okay, so now your kids get to understand, just like blitzes and motions and read game that we talked about, kids have to understand the ebb and flow of a game. When the screens are going to occur, we're very rarely going to call 5, 8, 10 screen plays in a row. Okay, so to run 10 screen plays in a row in practice, it's a good idea to work the screens, but at some point you got to get the kids back involved, especially the old linemen. They have to understand that you may have been up tempo, and you may have had some things that the linemen have been, working real hard 3, 4 plays in a row, and on that 5th play, they got to get out in space and block somebody on a screen. Well, you better do that so your linemen get used to how to change from, they got inside runs and they're working certain things, and then outside runs, and then a drop back pass or a quick play, or, all of a sudden followed by a screen play. All right, so to mix all those things together into a practice plan, all right, is usually common sense, and I'm sure most people understand that those are the things that you need to do. But I get a lot of guys that ask questions all the time about how to segment or break practices up, and how do you work on screen game, how do you work on read game. And the answer to all those things is we do work on them in segments, we do teach them in segments, we do work on them in position groups, smaller groups first, and then bigger groups or team settings second. All right, but the real answer is you have to integrate all that in to where you are understanding that those plays in a game setting are going to happen in different progressions. So you have to incorporate them into team settings to where they're going to happen more in a game-like manner so your kids can understand. Sometimes you can get so good with a practice plan and so situational and so specialized and so segmented that, you kind of forget that the game isn't played that way. The game is going to be played call by call, play by play, and it could go from, a screen to a run to a drop back pass to a quick pass. So I think sometimes you got to look at your overall practice plan and how you're calling that and say, hey, wait a minute, I got to mix this up a little bit more and make sure that I have all these things called in a 12 or 15 play script so that my kids can have a multitude of tasks to achieve so that I'm making it more like a game setting. All right? Another way that I look at that is when and where you incorporate your special teams. A lot of guys in their practice plan like to do special teams first. Maybe they do them last. Maybe they do them in the middle. And when and where you do them, I think that's up to each individual coach as long as you understand the importance of how you're emphasizing them. But I think for us, one thing that we like to try and do a little bit every once in a while is we also try and mix the special teams in between the offense and the defensive periods and get maybe 1 or 2 live reps. Maybe you get a rep with the 1s and a rep with the 2s on a punt team after you've done an offensive period so that your kids kind of get in the mode to understand that this punt team is not always going to happen in a segment that we can block out 10 to 15 minutes to just work punt. Okay, obviously in a practice plan, yes, we're going to work on punt in certain segments, but I think during the week at some point you've got to mix that punt team in from out of nowhere where your kids have to go from an offense or a defensive setting into that punt drill and execute 1 or 2 good punts, maybe different punts if you have different protections or different looks, and make them execute that after an offense or a defensive period so that they get the feel for what a game is, because in a game it's never going to be segmented to where you're going to get 6 punts in a row. So a lot of times if you do punt team and you're working, you know, the ones are getting 2 or 3 reps, then the twos get 2 or 3 reps, then you bring the ones back and you go with a different protection scheme, and then you bring the twos back. They're never going to happen in a game like that. Okay, so once you've segmented and specialized, all right, the period itself, and you've worked on kickoff or field goal or punt or kick return or punt block, once you've done those in certain periods, I think it's good to go back and integrate them somewhere in the practice plan to get it mixed up so your kids get a feeling of how they have to change the mindset from being an offense or a defensive player to all of a sudden being on the punt team and having to execute this protection. All of a sudden being on the kickoff team as a receiver or a safety and have to execute kickoff coverage after being, you know, running a base offense or a defensive player, after running a 5, 6, 8 play series on offense or a 5, 6, 8 play series on defense. So I think in your special teams, how you practice is important as well, where you're kind of segmenting things and breaking things down and saying, all right, we're doing some drills to work on punt protection, then we're working on the punt protection itself, then we're working on the punt coverage. That's great in a 15-minute period, but I think at some point you need to go back and address that in a live setting, not just a walkthrough on a Thursday. Okay, a lot of times, a lot of guys in their walkthroughs on Thursdays or Fridays, they'll have it scripted out to where it occurs just like a game setting, and you know, they'll do kickoff and then the defense will go out for a couple plays, and they'll do punt return, offense will come out, then they'll do punt, all right, then they'll kick an extra point, all right, maybe go to kickoff again, defense will come out, other team scored, let's work on, if they are muddle huddle or whatever they're doing, let's work on how we are going to block a field goal extra point or how we have to line up to it. Then let's bring our kick return team out. Then maybe you have a hand segment at the end where you're working on your onside kicks, and then your hands team is working on recovering kicks with a lead. Maybe you have a 2-minute drill that you do, or a 4-minute drill, or a certain situational drill. Those are all great on walkthrough settings, but I think in your normal practices what you got to do is find a way to incorporate all those things that are game-like, because the way I know that the kids that I have currently at the school I'm coaching at, we have got to stress what the game is like and how it happens so that we don't get them so, you know, compartmentalized into saying, okay, well, the game's going to happen in these blitz segments, in these base segments, it's going to happen in these sub-packages, and then the game's going to happen in read game segments and screen game segments and RPO segments. We got to get our kids to understand that once we have all those things dialed in, now for our kids, it's best that we teach them in segments first. All right, so it's always better for us that we teach the screens or the RPOs or the reads or the blitzes or the handling motions. We teach them in segments first. Once we feel like we've got them taught, then we need to integrate them into full settings, because it's better for our kids to see the ebb and flow of the game and how the ebb and flow of the game changes so that we can keep our kids ready for Friday night action. Okay, so obviously with practice plans, to each his own. Everybody has a different way that they like doing things. All right, I just thought I got, you know, I always get comments. I appreciate the comments so much, where, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. I love everybody's opinion, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. So a lot of times when I get comments asking me about how we practice certain things or how we do certain things, I always like to come out with a video every once in a while and kind of, you know, talk about how we are doing certain things. So, you know, today, when we're going to practice today, we're going to start off and we're going to do, you know, as soon as we come from flex, we're going to go and we're going to do punt live right away. And we're going to get a rep each in our protection scheme for the ones and the twos. And then we're going to go for the punt drill, and we're going to do a goal line drill right away, where we're going to do 5 plays. We're going to do a play from the 1, a play from the 2, a play from the 3, a play from the 4, a play from the 5. Okay, and then you know, and then we're going to go into a passing segment where we're going to work on drop back passes with screens. So we're working on hot protection, and we're also working on throwing screens. I'm going to mix those two together, so hopefully the kids on the scout team don't know the difference between the drop back passes and the screens, so that they don't play the screens the whole time. Okay, and then we're going to transfer over to defense. All right, after we do a kickoff segment, I'm going to let my kickoff team, my ones go live and my twos go live. Then we're going to transfer to a defensive segment, and we're going to work on blitzes only, and it's going to be nothing but a blitz period. So we're going to try and get the practice to move, and we're going to try and get it from punt team to goal line to a passing segment to a kickoff segment to a defensive blitz segment, and then at the end we're going to end it with an install of kick return stuff. So, you know, we got to, for me, I like to keep the practice moving. I like to keep things, the pace of it up. I like to keep people energized. So we're going to try and move it around today. But you can see how kind of compartmentalized or, you know, segmented it is, where I'm working on different things right now. And in today's setting, it's a punt segment and a goal line segment and a drop back pass screen segment, okay? And it's all segmented today. Now, tomorrow, when we come back to practice, all right, I'm going to have to mix my pressures in on defense tomorrow. The pressures are going to have to be mixed in a segment with base calls so that the kids can adjust. Today, they're working pressures only. Today, we're working drop back passes and screens only with no runs in there. Okay, so today, for me, while I shoot this video, today is segmented only. All right, there's not going to be a lot of integration back into, all right, into the team period with everything integrated together. Today is going to be segmented, and there's days where I do that on purpose. Okay, but there's also days where I understand that I've got to go back and integrate everything into more of a game setting. Okay, so just so that you understand, all right, you got to practice what you preach. Each day I have things that I'm working on as a head coach, and so are you within your program, and you got to do the things that you need to do to get better. So today for me, okay, is a segmented period only. There's not a lot of integration. All right, so I don't want people out there to think that maybe I write about some things, talk about some things, do other things. All right, today I am working on segments only, and there's not a ton of integration. Tomorrow I'll go back to integrating all those things together and working on throwing some things in to where our kids can get used to it in a game setting. All right, so we're working on those things today. I hope you guys have a great practice. I hope everybody stays healthy. I hope you're energized and ready to go. And remember, guys, you don't play well until you play fast. I'll catch you all next time.